Hi everyone, my name is King IV, and this is an accounts payable workshop for ACC 626 Spring 2015 edition. So here, just quickly, we have some data, accounts payable data, some case facts. So basically, any payments invoiced in 2014 but not paid off should be recorded, or paid off before fiscal year end should be recorded as accounts payable. And then here's some test requirements. So here, reconcile the AP ledger to the general ledger, identify any payments that are invoiced in the current fiscal year but not recorded, identify payments under recorded, randomly select 5 samples from those 2 populations in total, and then here, identify vendors with invalid SIN or HST numbers. So I'm going to delete some of this data. Actually, and I'm just gonna re-import it. Okay, so let's import this data. So you'll see here we have accounts payable, payments, and a vendor master. But what you'll notice, interestingly, is that the payments file has some like weird funky formatting on the vendor number and the invoice number when compared to the accounts payable. So that's just good to note. And then we just want to run some field statistics to make sure that our data has got imported correctly. Okay, so here we see it's 1.3 million, 1.3, which ties to the general ledger. So that's good. Done step 1. And then as well, just want to make sure that this makes sense. So 4968 records, 1.3. That's good. Let's go to the payments. 1.5. Interesting. 1.35. So we go to the payments. 1.35. Good. And then we'll go to the last one, which is the vendor master. We'll see that there's 55 records, less the title. It's 55. We're good to go. We can also, for example, summarize on vendor type and just take a quick look, and we'll call that type sum. And we'll see here that these numbers should tie out. And they do. Okay, perfect. So we're good on terms of the completeness, at least from completeness from what's recorded in the financial statements currently. Doesn't necessarily mean that's correct. So what we're going to do here is, you'll notice that as I pointed out earlier, the vendor numbers have some funky stuff. So what's actually happening here is that the vendor number in the payments is always 3 digits, while the vendor number here is not necessarily always 3 digits. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new field, and we're going to call this vendor modified. And we're going to 5 here. And then here we're going to use this function called write. And then I'm just going to put a bunch of leading zeros out in front. Probably didn't need that many, but that's fine. And then here I'm going to say, basically what I'm doing is I'm starting from the right and taking the last 3 characters. So if the vendor number is only 1 character, I'm going to take 2 zeros. If it's 1 character, I'm going to take or if it's 2 characters, I'm going to take 1 zero. If it's 3 characters, I'm going to take no zeros. Oh. Okay, I see what's happening here. So the reason why it's doing this is because vendor number is actually numeric. So I'm just going to change that. Okay, doesn't look like that it's liking that. So we're going to have to change this in our table editor. And then here I'm going to remove this. So now that I've changed this, I changed the formula, and now we should be good to go. So there you go. Now we have these leading zeros. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the payments file and going to normalize this data. So what you'll see here, there's some like random spaces, dashes, all sorts of stuff here. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna create a vendor invoice modified, and we're going to make that 5 characters long. And we're gonna use 2 functions here. We're gonna use string and just numbers. So what just numbers does, it just leaves the numbers left in the string, and then what string does, basically converts that, because the output of that is gonna be numbers. And we want it to be characters. So there you go. So you'll see both files now cleaned up. Let's perform a join. Attending accounts payable. Here we're going to join based off of vendor number and modified vendor. And then here we're going to join based off of modified invoice and invoice. Sending. Perfect. And I want records with no secondary match. And I'm going to call this payments no AP. Perfect. So there you go. So now we have these items here. Beautiful. Next thing we want to do is we're going to do very similar. Now I want to figure out, there's 8 payments without these vendor IDs. Now I want to figure out, are there any where we under record the payments? So the way I'm going to do that is, first thing I'm going to do is join with this outstanding AP data, and very similar to what I did previously. So vendor number, and then I should pick vendor modified, but I'll do that in a minute. And I'm going to call this payments with AP. Okay. And the reason why is I only want the payments that are in the AP file. And then here, I'm going to do the regular match. And I'm going to see if I can not use any of these. Okay, I have to include at least one field, which is fine. Also include vendor. So there you go. So that makes these 2 populations add up to the whole one. That's good. So now I have this field here. And I'm essentially just going to do a summarize on vendor and on invoice, modified invoice. And I'm going to total the amount. Perfect. And then I'm going to call this payment sum. And the reason why is that multiple payments may occur for the same invoice number across vendors, or within the same vendor. So you'll see here there was 2 of them that were the same, and now I'm simply just going to join it back with the original accounts payable data. You'll see now the records line up, which is promising. So here I'm going to use vendor modified and matches only. I'm going to call this payments AP join. And now we see the amount here and amount here. And there's a couple ways you could do it. You create a new field, which I guess we can do. We can call it variance. And we'll put it to 2 decimal places. And all you have to do is really go trans sum minus trans amount. So this trans amount is the AP amount. And then we'll see here. And we'll see a lot of zeros here. And we'll see one payment is a lot higher, which is interesting, because then you'll look here and see the details that one line item does match up, but the second one is being under recorded for whatever reason. So let's extract that to a new table, and we're going to call this payments AP deficiencies or exceptions. And it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to say variance not equal to 0. And you'll see here, there's this one set of payments here. So how we're going to sample from the entire population is I'm essentially going to join primary with this data payments file with the data that we do have. So here I'm going to create a new field quickly. I'm going to call this exception 02. I'm going to make this a character. I'm just going to simply say this is yes. Make this 3 characters long. And then I'm going to go this payments with no AP. And I'm going to call this exceptions 01. Similar here, character. I'm going to call this yes. So this is the table with all these exceptions here. And then you can probably tell what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to these payments with no AP. I'm going to all records in the primary. The only field I want is this exception one. And then here I'm going to call this payments temp 01. And I'm going to match it based off of, in this case I can do it based off, actually no, I'll do it based off of vendor and invoice number modified, just to be consistent. Technically I did it based on payment ID, but I didn't check the integrity of the payment data. So you'll see here now these exceptions. Good. Okay, and now I'm gonna join the last table that I want to join to, where this is payments exceptions. And then all I want is this last field here. And very similarly, I'm gonna join based off of vendor and then invoice modified. I want all records, and then here I'm gonna call it payments temp 02, and we're gonna go there. Now I have these 2 records here, and now I'm gonna create a file called payment exceptions, which is basically gonna be I'm gonna use one of 2 things. So here we know that is blank gives us returns a 0 or 1, so we're gonna say exceptions equals 0, or, which means that's not blank, or exceptions, okay, basically 0, 1. Oh, I'm not sure why. Did I spell it differently? Oh yeah, I called it exceptions. Okay, there you go. So either way, is blank, exceptions is not blank, or exception 02 is not blank. We'll press OK. We should be left with 10 records, and then pretty simple. We are going to then randomly select 5 records here from all the records, and we're going to call this payment exceptions sample. Beautiful. Okay, perfect. So now we have these first 4 done. This last one is a little bit tricky, and technically this might be more applicable for some upcoming workshops, but I think it's a good activity to perform. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to do some SIN and HST number checks. And this is not a common activity, but something that you should know. And here we're essentially going to do, how you do this is you take the numbers, multiply it by the 1s or 2s, depending if it's an odd, you'd multiply by 1. If it's even, you multiply by 2, and then you sum those numbers up. The exception is if you have a 2-digit number, what you need to do is add the 2 digits together. So if it's 6 times 2, that's 12. You need to take 1 and 2, add them together. The shortcut we're going to do is essentially just -9 as we do it, because that's the same thing as if you take, for example, 7 times 2, that's 14. That's the same thing as taking, and you want to get to 5, right? 1 plus 4. That's the same thing as doing 14 minus 9. So let's start off. So I like to break this out into 2 parts. One part is for the even, and the other part's for the odd. The even numbers should be simpler in theory, and essentially what we are going to do here is we're going to take the value, and I'm going to convert the number to the string. Actually, we just need mid. You do need to convert the number to a string. Actually, I should check. Actually, if I remember correctly, because there's HST numbers as well, we don't need the string. So we're just going to take the number as is and take the first number, and then essentially we're just going to add those numbers up together, just like how we did in the formula. So I'm going to do this for 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So I'm just going to do this pretty quickly. Press OK. Now I'm going to add another one. Actually, shoot, I named it incorrectly, so it's actually called sin odd, because they're obviously the odd numbers. It's not really that big a deal, but next thing I need to do is go sin even, and this gets a little bit trickier. So let's first do the formula of how we're going to do it. So we're going to go similar to what we did before, val, and then we're going to do mid, and then we're going to look at the number. And this time we're going to look at the even number, so second digit, one character, and then we're going to multiply by 2. And then here comes the tricky part. So essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to take if, and then I'm going to say if this number is greater than 9, which means that it's a 2-digit number, then we need to add the digits together. So the way we're going to do this is just going to take the value of that calculation minus 9. Pretty simple. And then we are going to then have our else statement, which is just going to be the remaining formula. So hopefully everyone gets that concept of minus 9. You're basically dropping the 1 and then adding it back in as an arithmetic value. So now we're going to paste it, and then we're basically going to repeat it for the 4th, 6th, and 8th digits. The tricky part here is that there's obviously a lot of numbers here, so it's easy to make a mistake. Just remember you have to change 3 numbers, and I like to do one set at a time because I find it a little bit easier. Sometimes I debate, instead of multiplying by 2, like dividing by a half, just so it's not so confusing with the 2's, multiply by 2's, but irregardless, we're going to proceed as is. So we are now just moving on to 8s, so we should be getting near the home stretch. Hopefully it accepts it. Yep, looks like it's good. We're going to press OK. Now what we want to do is add these numbers up together to get the sin total. So here, pretty simple, just going to add sin even plus sin odd to get our total. And next thing we want to do is do our sin check. And essentially what we're going to do here is I'm going to say yes or no, depending on whether or not it was a valid sin check. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take the second number, and then what I'm going to do that is I'm going to take the string of the sin total and just look at the second character. In this case, obviously make it 2 string character, look at the first, second character, and then if it's equal to 0, and then we know it's a good sin number. We'll say no, otherwise just put it as no, or put it as yes, and then otherwise put it as no. It's yes. So you can see here there's quite a few of them that are not valid. That might be a control breakdown, indication of that they need to fix something. So now let's take a look at the HST number. And now what we want to do is do this HST check. So if I take a look at my PowerPoint, you'll see here some guidance. So if the first 9 characters are numeric, if the next 2 are one of these 3, then we're good. Or if, and the last 4 numbers are non-numbers. So in this case, Let's go back to here. Let's what I like to do on this one is like to break up into HST parts. And it's gonna look a little bit weird because there's all these other there's the same ones as well. So here I'm gonna call it part 01. I think this sometimes people want to do it all at once, and that's good as well. I just find sometimes it's a little bit easier to do your checks if you break them up into parts. So I'm just gonna copy that. There's the numbers, and I'm gonna call it HST Part 02. Virtual character, which is gonna be, in this case, we're looking at the 10th and 2. And I know some of you are probably thinking, like, this is such a small list. Why can't I just do it manually? You're right, you could do it manually, and most of the time you would. But in this case, we're just conceptualizing how to actually perform this. So in this case, I'm looking at the 12th and going for 4 characters, so that if you had a bigger list, you could actually go and apply this. Okay, so now we bring this, and I'm going to validate each part. I'm going to call it HST Part 01 check, and I'm just going to give it a score so that it'll be a little bit easier to tally up later. So I'm going to say just numbers, HST Part 01, or yeah, we could do it this way. We can go just letters, HST Part 01, and say, is it blank? So if it is blank, we're going to give a score of 1, which means that it's valid. If it's not blank, then obviously it's not good. Oh, sorry, actually I have it backwards. If it is blank, it's going to give it 1. If it's not blank, then it's going to give it 0. Okay, so I'll just leave that. So all the invalid ones, so it has to tally to score of, so this is good. So if it is blank, it's going to give a score 1. So you see the 0, 1 here. I'll be interested in seeing what the issue is. Looks like there's an S instead of a 5, which is tricky. So we're actually only looking at these couple records, so it doesn't really matter about the rest of it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is this HST Part 02 check. And essentially what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go, what's the best way of doing this? Okay, so the best way of doing this is probably going to be if length. In this case, I'm going to be doing just letters again on HST Part 2. And I'm going to say if the length is equal to 2, give it a score of 1, otherwise give it a score of 0. You could break it up into checking. I can clearly see these ones are all RT. You could do if it's this, if it's that. I'm not going to do that this time, but it's something good to check in general. So here, similar to what we did previously, I'm going to say is blank, and I'm going to use just letters, HST Part 3, and if it does contain any letters, then it'll be kicked out. So you'll see here there's 0. Okay, and then essentially I'm going to go HST check character. I'm going to say here I'm going to go if HST Part 1 check plus HST Part 2 check plus HST Part 3, and I'm going to put our bracket around this whole thing is equal to 3, then yes. Otherwise, no. Oh yeah, sorry, I gotta put the length of the characters. there you go. So you can see which ones are valid and which ones are not. Okay, so if we were to export this, I'm going to call this SYN exceptions. I'm basically going to say if SYN check is equal to yes, and I don't want to include the HST one, so I'm going to say and length of SYN, the number is equal to 9, then export it. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to extract another table here called HST exceptions. And I'm going to say not equal to 9, and, or I should say no. I should change that. HST check is equal to no. Change this right here. So you see here the 2 exceptions here, the 40 exceptions here. I apologize, this is a longer video. There's a lot of complexities to this accounts payable one that I threw in this year. But if you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave it in the comments section below. And if there's any other items that you want me to cover or any other items that you want me to clarify, please let me know. Thank you.